All right, and I believe we are live. Hello, everybody. We have an amazingly big group of people here today. I'm super excited to be here with you all and introduce you all to Kristen, our esteemed guest. I really don't want to take up too much time, but for just to cross our T's and dot our I's. For those of you who are new to Skill Crush, my name is Ada Bernier. I'm the founder and CEO of Skill Crush. And just so happy to have you all here today for this awesome conversation. I just want to make sure that you guys all know that Skill Crush, we're an online education company, and our mission is to, empower our students with technical skills that they need in order to enter higher earning, more flexible and more fulfilling jobs in tech. And it's really something that, you'll see us say a lot and talk about, is that we really believe that tech is for everyone. So no matter who you are, where you are in life, where you are in the world, and actually we'd love to hear where you are in the world. We really believe that if you have interest in, are excited about technology and working in tech, then we welcome you, and we would love to help you be a part of, figure out what path is going to make sense for you to enter the tech world. So with all that said, I would like to introduce my amazing guest, Kristen. And actually, I asked you a bunch of questions and didn't ask you to make sure I was saying your last name correctly. So Doucette.
Yeah.
Okay, nice. So Kristen Doucette is here. She is an amazing developer, or software engineer, actually. It's technically, this is like one of those things where people are like, what's the difference between software engineer and developer? And I'm like, it's a great question. Maybe Kristen will finally be able to put this one to rest today in today's webinar. We'll see if that happens. Anyway, so she is calling in from Greeley, Colorado. I'm based in Queens, New York. Look at the magic of the internet. I'm seeing that people are calling in from Los Angeles and Oklahoma and the Bay Area and Atlanta and Florida and Maine. So that is super awesome, and just speaks to what we love about everything that we can do here. So Kristen is an amazing example. Part of the reason I invited her to come speak today is because she's a great example of somebody who didn't take a traditional path into the tech industry. And I put air quotes because I think that just because it's traditional doesn't mean it's what the majority of people do. And I think increasingly it's becoming less and less common to have a traditional path, with that traditional path being that you go to college, you get a computer science degree, you graduate, and you become a developer. So Kristen did go to college, but she didn't study computer science. She studied psychology, which I actually bet comes into handy in all kinds of unexpected ways. After college, she, like many of us, myself included, I shouldn't project onto your experience, but I will say for myself, spent a couple of years trying to, find oneself, doing odd jobs. For me, it was working for a lot of different artists. For Kristen, it was working in sort of waiting tables, server type positions, and then transitioned into healthcare. And then she's going to tell you what then led her to where she is today. But anyways, Kristen is just an amazing person who did a boot camp, has really kicked ass in her job, just started a new job. She's going to tell us all about it. And I'm just going to stop talking. One last thing is for some housekeeping. There is an Ask a Questions module. We did take your questions ahead of time. Kristen has incorporated them into her presentation. I do see that you guys are using the Ask a Question module. That's awesome. We're going to keep track of that. I will also be monitoring the chat. And that's it. Take it away.
Awesome. Well, first of all, big thank you to Ada and Skill Crush for hosting this and putting this on. And thank you to all of you for being here. I know it's a big step and kind of a scary idea of transitioning into tech and taking that risk. And this is a big first step in just gathering some of that information. And I know it's a big deal to all of you. So I just want to say thank you for being here and taking the time. So I'm going to go ahead and start a presentation. I did try to incorporate as much of your questions as possible. Let me just fix this firewall here. 1 second. Technical difficulties. As you will discover in tech, we do encounter those pretty often.
Apparently, you're a fellow Mooney, which I didn't even know that was a thing, but I thought that might mean something to you.
Oh, yeah. I definitely saved this shirt for today. I'm a big fan.
Very nice. I'm familiar with who Sailor Moon is, though, for the record. I just want to.
All right. It does say I may need to rejoin. Just 1 second here.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for bearing with us. In the meantime, well, I see that you all are calling or letting us know where you're calling in from. I'd love to hear. Oh, hold on. Let me just make sure that she's all set. Okay, good. Yeah, she's coming back. Yeah, I would love to hear, what brought you all here today. So if you have a second to drop that in the chat. What brought you to this webinar? Where are you at in your journey? Brainerd, Minnesota. I don't know why I read Maine. That's Maine, but I know that's not. Aha. All right. Cool.
Problem solving at its best. Always live. All right.
Yes.
I think we've got it now. Thanks for your patience, everyone. Let me go ahead and try sharing once more. Success. All right. So hopefully everyone can see my screen now.
Yes, let me focus that part. There we go.
Awesome.
All right. We are in business.
Great. All right. So a day in the life of software engineer Kristen Doucette, which is me, again, hosted by Skill Crush and CEO Ada Benier. So to get started, I want to talk just a tad about myself. My name is Kristen. As Ada mentioned, I have a bachelor's of science in psychology, and I've worked mostly in restaurants and healthcare. I actually started coding in 2018, started dabbling on a platform called Khan Academy and checking out some JavaScript, which was really fun and interesting. I did a little bit of project work on the Odin project, which I never completed, but was still quite interesting. And then I started using another platform called Codecademy, which I still use to this day to kind of brush up on existing and new technology. In 2019, I really started to think I could actually code for a living. And so I decided to start attending some Women Who Code meetups, where I met a lot of really inspiring developers who had gone through boot camps, who had lots of experience in the industry. And that's when I decided to take the next step and enroll in Block, which was a boot camp. I think it was supposed to take you about 8 to 9 months to complete. It actually took me about 10 months. I was doing it part-time while still working full-time and also planning a wedding at the time, so I was quite busy. I finally did successfully graduate in February of 2020, and I will never forget the date of my first job that I started on March 16th in 2020, which was actually the first day of the pandemic lockdown. So I was also the first fully remote employee of the company at the time. I worked my first job for about 2.5 years before transitioning into my second job in tech, and I'll talk a little bit about both of those things. I've been at my new position for maybe 5 weeks now. And then I really like to meet every other week with my niece, where we pair program in a language called Scratch, which is just drag and drop blocks of code, and we use code.org, which is a lot of fun. So a little bit about my technical experience and my technical background. My first job was with a company called Radial Development Group, which is a tech consulting company, and I worked as a lead developer. So tech consulting is a little bit different from the other position where I work now, which is a product company. In tech consulting, you have a group of developers and a client comes to you and says, I have this idea for an app, or I have an existing app and it needs some work. And they'll either pay you by the hour, or you might do what's called a fixed bid, where they say, I'm going to give you this amount of money and I want you to build this thing in this amount of time. So with Radial Development Group, the first offer, or the offer that I received from them, was for about $66K a year, which was almost double what I was making at the time in healthcare. They offered generous PTO, about 2 months, which was ridiculous to me, and they had fully paid healthcare, which was hugely important to me. I actually was introduced to Radial from someone that I met at the Women Who Code meetup. There were 2 interviews. The first was an online call, and then the next one was in person in office. And I actually did not get the job offer right away. They let me down gently and told me that they just didn't have enough work. But about a week later, they had gotten a new client and they offered me the job. So it was totally shocking and miraculous and wonderful and exciting for me. After about 3 months working at Radial Development Group as just a normal developer, I became a lead developer as another person had left and a project became available and they needed a lead developer, and I decided to just go for it. At Radial, there was lots of what is called pair programming, and you'll probably hear that term a lot. And all that means is you're using some type of video and screen sharing platform to show people the code that you're writing. Maybe they can even click and type on your screen for you so that you can actually work together. There were lots of what are called one-on-ones, which is just a little meeting with like your team lead or your manager. They also did weekly retros or retrospectives, which is just when all of the engineers get together and they ask the questions, what went well, what didn't go well, and what can we do to get better at that? There were also client meetings, which I'll talk a little bit more in a little bit. And then there was mentorship. So I had a mentor who helped guide me, and I in turn had a mentee who I helped guide. I would say that it took about an entire year until I was truly comfortable taking new stories and tickets and working them on my own. Um, and then I was working on a lot of different projects as we were a consulting company. I'd say you worked on anywhere from 1 to 4 different projects in a 2-week period of time. And this was in multiple languages. So my current job, I now work for a company called Credly, which is super cool and I'm very exciting. They're in the digital credentialing world. Highly recommend checking that out. But they are a product company, and how that kind of differs from tech consulting is that instead of clients coming to us and saying, I want you to build this thing for me, we have our own platform that we continue to build, continue to iterate on, and then we give it directly to users. My role here now is software engineer. So at this new job, I am now making 6 figures, which kind of still blows my mind. They offer unlimited PTO, which is quite nice. They're definitely just like Radial. They encourage you to take the time you need to be healthy, to enjoy yourself. But I do have to pay for my own healthcare, which is probably okay at this point. For this particular position, a recruiter had actually reached out to me. I would say that once I reached the 2 year and 3 month mark of experience, a lot of recruiters have been reaching out to me saying, we have this particular project, you might be a good fit. Lots of different recruiters. I did about 4 interviews total to get this job. The first was just an interview with the recruiter. The second was an interview with the VP of engineering at the company. The third was a 2-hour technical interview. And then the last was a panel interview with some of the product managers and some of the HR and the VP of engineering. Their expectations are that about 4 to 6 weeks to get up to speed to be able to be comfortable working on things on your own. And in high contrast to Radial, I have almost no meetings now. I have about 3 what are called stand-ups a week, where developers get together, we talk about what we're working on, if we're stuck, and what our goal is for the day or the week. There's 1 all hands meeting a month where we just talk about business updates and things that might be relevant. And I have not pair programmed at all so far, which is quite striking. And then the other difference is that it's so far just a single code base with 2 languages. So little different. So next, I want to talk about some of the most commonly used tools, because I'm sure many of you, as you're starting to investigate this career change, you're seeing a lot of these terms, a lot of these tools, a lot of these languages kind of thrown around. And so I want to tell you exactly what I'm working with. So as far as apps, we have Slack, which is just kind of a chat application. You can send direct messages to people. Entire teams can communicate in a channel. You can send files and pictures. Very useful. We have Zoom, which is, again, one of those screen sharing platforms so other people can see what you're doing and what you're working on. It allows you to share screen controls so people can, type on your screen and move the mouse around. And then Gmail. So those are the basic communication tools. Next, these are the ones I was less aware of when I first started developing, but Pivotal and Jira. So these are called ticket or story type of management systems where when you are building software or a platform, let's say you want to add a button to a page, either your product manager or whoever is creating these tickets will make a new ticket or story, perhaps titled Add button to index page. They'll add some details about that story, and then they can assign that ticket or that story to a developer, or a developer can assign themselves, and then they can give updates on that ticket or that story as you're going through the process of developing that feature. Next is Fellow. I don't use this at my new job, but I loved it at my other job. It's kind of like a task management and meeting notes tool, but you can hook that up to your Google Calendar, and every single meeting will have its own section of notes. You can create tasks, assign them to yourself, assign them to other people. It was really, really nice for keeping organized. Next, we have what are called integrated development environments. I literally had to Google this before the slideshow because I couldn't remember what IDE standed for. But Visual Studio Code and RubyMine are two of the development environments that I use commonly. And what I mean by this is that they're the programs where all of your code that you're writing is going to live as you write and develop it. After that, we have Rollbar, Sentry, and Loggly. So these are considered error reporting systems. Let's say your website, a user clicks a button and it crashes. That seems pretty bad. And I think you'd probably want to know about it. And using these types of error reporting systems, it sends a little log to, let's say, Rollbar, and it can tell you things like what went wrong. How many times is it going wrong? What user is it going wrong for? What type of device were they on? What kind of browser were they using? And in some cases, it can even tell you the exact code that's breaking. Super useful. Next is GitHub. So many of you have probably heard or seen GitHub before, but for those of you who have not heard about GitHub, it is considered a version control system. And essentially, this allows you to keep features that you are building in kind of a separate space or branch, as you'll come to learn, and keep your code that you have on your website on production on a separate branch so that you don't have to be changing and editing things on your live website until they're fully developed. Some common languages, libraries, and frameworks that I've kind of worked with over the last 2.5 years include HTML, CSS, and Sass. Those are kind of your basic static website tools. And then we have JavaScript, React, Redux, jQuery, and Vue, Ruby and Ruby on Rails, C Sharp, and Xamarin Forms, which seriously is just the worst framework. It's end of life. If you see it, be apprehensive. So, what did my day at Radial actually look like? I'm going to give you a little walkthrough. So starting at about 8 a.m., which was my choice. Hours are usually pretty flexible at both places I've worked. You usually just have to be online for a core hours, like 9 a.m. to like 3 p.m. or something like that. So that'd take me about 10 minutes. Next, normally on like a Monday, I would review those rollbar logs for existing or new errors. It didn't usually take too long because there wasn't a lot coming through, but sometimes something comes through and it could be concerning. You want to check all the details, make sure it's not breaking things for everyone. Just examine what type of issue, decide if you need to make a new ticket or story in those ticketing platforms, and see if you need to assign it to a developer right away to be investigated. So after that, I would spend some time doing what is called pre-grooming. Again, this was kind of a weekly occurrence, normally on Mondays for me. And when we do pre-grooming, essentially this is me looking at those tickets and saying, do we have enough details that any developer could pick this up and start working right away? You want to ask things like, are we describing the feature fully? What should happen when you click the button? What should the button even look like? What page should it be on? Have we added buttons like this anywhere before? Just information like that, anything that can help someone work on the story. After that, I would go attend a daily stand up. Again, so this is where the developers meet. We talk about our daily goal, any blockers that we're encountering. And if we're stuck, then we schedule some pairing. There's definitely been times where I go into a stand up and say, gosh, I've been working on this button. I cannot figure out why I can't get it to click. And then Dan will say, oh, great, let's pair on it from 1 to 3. We can take a look. I just did something similar. After stand up, I would spend time doing what is called grooming with the team. Again, this would be a weekly occurrence, usually on a Tuesday for me, but this would be where the team comes together and now we look at all of the tickets that I have pre-groomed together. My developers get to ask questions. They get to say, oh, that doesn't really match the design of the website. Maybe we should take that question to the client. Or they might have suggestions like, oh, I've seen this button in this place before. Can we add that to the notes so when I come back to it, I know where to start? Literally anything, any question that people have, we try and go over it in grooming. We try to add more details. We try to add clues for ourselves just to make it better so that these tickets are exactly ready for work when the developer gets to them. After that, I'll typically have a client meeting. Again, this would just be a weekly occurrence on a Wednesday. They were actually quite fun. I would typically get a small business update from the client, how things are going for them. We would then review all of our in progress work. So, all of those tickets that developers have already started working on, I'd try to give them a progress update, how it's going, if it's going slower than we anticipated or faster, where it's at, how much longer it might take. And then we would discuss ideas for future work. Like, for instance, they said, oh, I want to add a graph to this page. How hard do you think that would be? Oh, maybe we should add a ticket to investigate tools for that, and so on. After that, from 12 to 1, I take a lovely hour-long lunch where I get to relax. And then from 1 to 3 on this hypothetical day, I would start, continue, or pair on the ticket that I'm working on. And what this involves, some of you may already know as you've started your coding journey, but some may not know what is involved. Normally, we would start by writing some tests, and these tests are going to tell you when something breaks as you're changing things, or it's going to tell you if your feature is working in the way that you expect it. Next, you might spend some time investigating useful libraries to do the work for you. One of the great advantages of technology is that you do not have to reinvent the wheel anymore. There are tons of libraries that can do things for you, like give you correctly formatted dates or even style things for you. After that, you would implement your feature. That's where you would add the HTML, the CSS for your new button on the page. And then finally, you would post what is called a pull request and ask for reviews from the team. And a pull request is where you push your code to that platform GitHub that we were talking about, where it keeps your code separate. And then you could compare the changes, allow other developers to look at your PR, provide feedback, and either approve or request changes on that. After that, from about 3 to 4, I would review other people's pull requests. And when I'm reviewing a pull request, that involves manually testing the feature. Does this button do what I expect it to? Does it follow the story specifications? You would look at the design. Is that actually the color that they said they wanted it? Is the text the right boldness? And then lastly, you would look at the actual code. Are you following best practices? Or is the code just gnarly and hard to read? Maybe you would suggest a refactor of it. From 4 to 5 on this hypothetical day, I would have a one-on-one with one of my managers, whether that was my team lead or even the owner of the company. Some of them were weekly, some of them were monthly, and they were extremely valuable to me in that I used them to provide feedback and they gave me feedback. I would ask any question on my mind and they would give me either more information, a tool set to help me, or even encourage me and say, look how far you've come, which is really valuable. So, other activities or duties that I would have while working at Radial included monitoring the help channel. This was one of my favorite things at Radial, the help channel, where you could post anything. Again, can't figure out that button. Post it in the help channel. Say, I've tried these things. They aren't working. Here's what I want to have happen, and I can't figure it out. Normally, you'll get responses to that issue, or you might even hop on a Zoom call and work on it together. Sometimes I'd have to respond to client fires. Maybe they might reach out and say, hey, none of our emails are going through. Can you take a look at that? And the next action would be to write up one of those tickets to document again what is happening, what's going wrong. Is it really pertinent? If it's truly a fire, assign it to a developer right away, start investigating, and figure out a fix. I would meet with my mentee and my mentor where we would try and create goals either related to tech or even career, and then try and outline some steps on how to get there. I would also need to respond to and address pull request comments that people have left on my code. So let's say, again, they say, this code is really hard and terrible to read. You might want to consider a refactor. I need to respond to that comment. I need to give it a try. Or maybe I'll even schedule a calendar event with that person to pair on it with them. Retrospectives, again, this is where all of us would get together and kind of review, how did the week go? Is there something that went terribly wrong? Is there something that went wonderfully right? And how can we make things better? Another duty was sprint reporting. So at Radial, a sprint was considered a 2-week period. And at the end of this period, I would send an email to both the team and the client talking about the progress that we've made on what stories. Have we completed them? What kind of blockers are we encountering? And then what does the budget look like for that consulting company? Are we at about 30 out of 50 budgeted hours for the project? What does it look like? And lastly, we had happy hour at Radial where we all just got together for an hour, hung out, and sometimes played some games. I would say one of the biggest challenges at this particular job was just staying organized and on top of my time. It was definitely a little tricky juggling multiple projects and responsibilities. As you'll learn, context switching between projects or languages or anything can get kind of tiresome and wear you out. The favorite thing I loved about Radial is that I could ask for as much help as I needed, no matter how silly the question. And it really will save you a lot of time if you just have an avenue to ask for help when you need it. So, what does my day at Credly look like now?
Do you mind?
Oh, yeah.
Can I ask you a couple of questions I see coming in before we move on to
Please,
Credly?
yeah.
Can I actually just ask a question about Radial, which is, was it all developers?
Yes, it was all developers, and then we had one salesperson. At one point, we had someone working on media, but it was almost all exclusively developers who were then promoted into a lead developer position where they did what would normally be considered a product manager's job.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was wondering. Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, so it's a little bit unusual, I guess. Not that it's not
Mhm.
still like a challenge to be organized, but that's like often in a lot of other jobs, and maybe this will be part of Credly, like those two roles are separated. So there's a question here that I thought was a good one, which is, what was one of the most difficult things about the job during your first days and months?
Oh, sure. I think in the first few days and months, it was really challenging because I was fully remote. So I was at home alone in my office, which was not dissimilar to working at the boot camp, trying to get things done kind of on my own. But it was a little weird not being in an office, not having someone right next to me that I could just lean over and say, hey, how do you do this thing? And so it kind of felt like every communication was bigger or more important when I had to reach out for help or I had to schedule an entire Zoom call or a calendar event. And honestly, I do think that was my biggest challenge. And it did take some time to, I guess, kind of bolster my courage and just say, I need to start reaching out for help. I need to like be active in messaging people and asking for things when I need it, just because they aren't right next to me.
Yeah. Was there anything about, I mean, that first of all makes total sense. This is like something I feel like we try to always just like schedule a bunch of standing meetings with new people. And I think like usually they're like, this is too much. And then we're like, no, just trust us.
Yep.
It'll be better this way than if they have to, initiate it because it's hard.
Right.
I'm curious, like, what surprised you? Because this was your first job in this, you know what I mean? I'm sorry, I'm listening to you describe this and I'm like, was this a huge culture shock? Like, what was it like? Like, talk about, like, I don't know,
Yeah.
like, it's funny because I feel like everything you're talking about to me at this point is so, like, I take it for granted, but it's great to hear you describe it because I'm also like, it is a very particular, I mean, it sounds like you were in a very sort of, I don't know what the word is. It's kind of like, it sounds like the culture of Radial was very like developed. It was like developer,
Definitely.
like in a good way, but like, nonetheless, like, yeah, I'm just curious. What was that? Yeah. How did you know what you're getting yourself into? Were you surprised? Were there like, did you find that you liked something that you would never, I don't know, just what you expect?
Yeah, I guess I really had no idea what to expect. And because of that, I think I was surprised at how similar the work was to what I had done in the boot camp. Um, you're coding, you're making pull requests, you're using GitHub, you're using the terminal, you're looking up documentation, you're doing all the things that you learned. And I guess I don't know why that was surprising to me, but it kind of was. It was just a little bit different, I guess, than what I expected for no particular reason.
That's interesting. No, I think it's a good point that it's sort of like, it's like you think that there's something that you're not going to be ready for. I actually think, I'm
Mhm.
sure, I don't know. I guess I'm curious to all of you who are watching. Do you think that, or do you worry about that? Like, do you feel like there's going to be something that you just can't possibly be prepared for? I think that's a really funny and interesting. And I feel like I would bet that there's a lot of people that also have that same.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, fear definitely inspires interesting expectations, you know.
Yeah. I feel like there's another. Okay, so this is a question that I think, is hard to answer across the board, but is a very common question for our students to ask, which is, what type of skill sets do you need to get into a software developer job or to at least get one foot in the door? And I guess maybe if we can put this into sort of your personal experience, like, what do you feel like Radial was looking for? You know what I mean? Like, what sort of made it possible for you to get that job?
Yeah, so we'll definitely talk about some of the things that I think will help you be successful a little
Cool.
further
I'm
on, but
happy to wait.
definitely.
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
totally.
I mean, I would say to answer your question, though, radio looks for a very particular type of thing, and that is someone who is going to ask questions and not be ashamed to ask questions. That was a big part of what they were looking for in their candidates, and they made that very clear because that's what makes a lot of the developers at their consulting company extremely successful.
Yeah, I think that's smart. Okay, cool. I will send it back on over to you, and we're gonna hear all about Credly.
Yeah. So now you might be wondering, like, how is it different? What does my day at Credly look like? It's really not too dissimilar, except that I have those, way less meetings. So again, I start my day at about 8, take about 10 minutes to check Slack, check emails, look at a couple things, and then I have a little chunk of time to start working on my tickets. Just like at Radial, I would either continue work or start a new one. We have stand up only 3 times a week as opposed to daily. Again, it's about a half hour where the engineers meet. We talk about what we're working on, what our goal for the day is, and if we're stuck and who needs help. Um, Twice a week, Credly offers a really awesome mindfulness meeting where someone kind of leads us through breathing exercises that I super, super enjoy and I feel like contribute to being a little bit less stressed. Then I have another nice chunk of time, again from 10 to noon. I continue my ticket work, working on the features, bugs, whatever it is that they throw at me. And then again, I have about an hour lunch from 12 to 1. From 1 to 1:30, again on this hypothetical day, I'll have a one-on-one with my manager. This occurs about every 2 weeks. Again, we kind of just communicate if we have any feedback for each other, what's going well, what's not going well, what kind of career goals we might have or technical goals and how we might get there. And then again, I have another lovely large chunk of time from about 1:30 to 4 where I continue that ticket work once again. At the end of my day, I'll have about an hour where I am looking at other people's code, reviewing those pull requests, again, either approving them or asking for changes, depending on what I find in those pull requests. Other duties or activities that might come up during the day or week include an all hands meeting, which happens about every 2 weeks, just a business update, how are things going. And then they also do a retrospective, but only monthly instead of weekly, where once again we give feedback, what's going well, what's not going well, and how can we make it better. I would say that the biggest challenge that I face at this new job is just getting acclimated to such a huge code base. And that's only so far because I am sure I will encounter a lot more challenges. My favorite thing so far about Credly is there's a lot less focus on deadlines. There's one single code base, and I have a lot more time to code as well. So, some of the biggest challenges that I kind of find in tech, the first one being imposter syndrome. So, for those of you who don't know, imposter syndrome is doubting your abilities and intellectual self doubt, thinking, I can't do this thing, I'm not smart enough, I'm not capable enough, I'm not whatever enough. And this doesn't just apply to tech, but every industry. Um, this is a thing that I so far have not it hasn't gone away, and I don't think it will go away just due to the nature of but there are things that you can and will need to do to combat it. And I highly recommend documenting, celebrating, and remembering your wins. Whatever you need to do, start a blog, keep a spreadsheet, take a picture, anything you need to do when your code works, when you get it to boot up that first time, when your tests are all passing, you must savor and remember those victories so that the next time that you get stuck, the next time you say, I can't do this, you know that you can because you have evidence that you have done it in the past. This takes a lot of time and effort to overcome, but it is going to be something that the vast majority of us deal with in transitioning into tech. um, Ever-changing technology. So the ocean of technology, as I call it, is continuing to grow in both depth and breadth. We have to kind of understand that this also kind of contributes to job security, though. It means there's going to be more specialities, but also more legacy code bases out there that are going to require developers who know how to do them or work with them. Continuous learning as a result of ever-changing technology, it can be quite exhausting, but you must practice patience and allow yourself to learn and understand that this is simply a part of it. Um, Deadlines. So I mentioned that at Credly, one of my favorite things is that they don't care as much about deadlines. It can be challenging to meet them. It can be stressful when you don't meet them. But what I have found, especially at Radial, when we were in a tech consulting company where we had sprint goals, where we might not meet them, the thing you need to do to combat this stress, is clearly communicate. Talk about exactly what you're encountering. Explain it to the client, to your team lead, whoever it is. And if you can clearly communicate the exact complexities or whatever the problems are, if you say, hey, I have time scheduled with my senior principal engineer this afternoon to work on it, whatever you need to do to communicate that you're acknowledging there was a problem or a deadline missed, if you take action to resolve it, I have almost never encountered an issue with just telling people why we missed that deadline and here's what we're doing about it. Um, Another big challenge is that software is difficult. It's complex. Someone asked if you need advanced math, and I don't think so. It's not so much math, but it is about detail-oriented reading and understanding a lot of documentation, and that will take time. And it will take more time to just be familiar with the tools that will help you kind of unravel this complexity. Again, you don't have to be a math genius or have like a talent in science or something. You just have to have patience and be patient enough to allow yourself to pick out all of those tiny details. Um, the last big challenge, communication. So, funny enough, I have found that the most challenging issue in software, whether you're talking to another developer or a client expecting work to be done, is communication. And it's the amount of technical information that you can translate to human readable text and conversation will be extremely important to your success. I've seen developers who try to communicate with a client, but because they're so beyond the technical understanding of the client, they don't even try to dumb it down. They just give them this technical jargon that the client doesn't understand. So they have no idea why this thing is taking longer because it's impossible for them to know. But again, if you can interpret that complication, that complexity, the thing that you're encountering into text that your client can be like, oh, yeah, that does make sense. I do know that these relationships are really tough and they're really complicated. That makes sense that it's taking that long. This is going to be one of the biggest skills that I think you can grow. It's one of the biggest challenges in technology. And I think it's one of the biggest reasons that people transitioning into technology are invaluable.
I'm like, say it louder for the people in the back. I mean, I not only is this so true, like I can't even, like the amount of just, yeah.
Crazy.
I'm just sitting here thinking through all the like times in which communication, but I think exactly like to really put a fine point on what you're saying, like this is exactly what people who have, who have recently transitioned, this is like where you have something to offer that somebody who is way further down the road, like is not able to provide or is much harder for them. So I love this. Love it. Yes. You so well put. So your communication here about a very complicated technical topic is so
Essential.
good.
So, one of the questions that we wanted to kind of cover is a tech career right for you? How do you know? How do you determine whether you want to take this big risk, put in all this work? And in my opinion, think that there are many, many reasons that a career in tech could be right for you. First and foremost, do you love learning? It's quite likely that if you get into tech, you will never run out of new things to learn, to experience, to try, to play with. That was one of the reasons that I started dabbling with code on Khan Academy, because I was bored and I hadn't learned anything new in a really long time. And it was really inspiring to me. Maybe you just love technology. One of the things I find really interesting, oh, and surprising, as people were asking, is that you really do begin to see the world differently once you understand how complicated technology is and the things that you can do to fix it. We really do live in a fantastic age of technology. I think we absolutely live in the future, and you can build almost anything with technology. And I think it's just going to continue to grow and advance. We have artificial intelligence and augmented reality, which I was just reading are going to become huge sectors of the tech industry as well. And that super excites me. So if you're a lover of technology, you could really be romanced by all the tech that's out there, all the things that you can learn about. Maybe you love problem solving. Are you an investigator who relishes fixing things? Whether it's like a leaky faucet or your broken computer, like whatever it is, do you have one of those moments where you took the time to research and find, how do I fix this thing? Maybe you YouTubed, how do I fix a leaky faucet? And then you tried that strategy and it worked. That feeling of success is one of those wonderful, savory feelings that I love about coding, when things go right after careful investigation and you find the solution. It is extremely satisfying. Another thing that might indicate it's a good career path for you, just social justice. So I think in tech that there's a huge need for equal representation to ensure that technology is being built so that it is not only accessible for everyone who can use it, but that it's being built for all of us from everywhere. Look at everyone here from all over the world. It is going to take all of us working together to make sure that technology is being built inclusively for all of us. And that's again, for me, a huge driver. Um, or maybe it is as simple as you want a desirable career with other advantages, such as working remotely, a livable wage, focus on work life balance, or maybe just more opportunities. In tech, it's not just coders and programmers, but once you have some of that coding knowledge and understand software development, the life cycles, you could go on to be a team lead. You could be a manager of multiple teams. You could be a chief technical officer. You can be a mentor. You can be a product manager, a designer, a data scientist. There are so many different sectors in tech where you could fit in. And there's a lot to be desired about those particular careers and the kind of lifestyle that they offer. And again, these are just some of the reasons. If you Google, why should I be in tech? You will get a lot of different and fantastic answers.
I'm like, and please, tell us what has made you interested in being in tech. If anyone has anything to add to this list.
Yeah, I'd love to hear what other people are thinking. And, sharing those ideas and passions with other people is going to inspire those things in others as well. I'd say that this list right here, are probably some of my big drivers for wanting to get into tech. Again, I like to learn. I get high satisfaction from trying a new thing and seeing it work. I do enjoy technology. I'm a big video game nerd. I didn't know a lot about it when I first started, but I've always thought computers were really cool. Problem solving, I would say now I really love problem solving. Maybe not so much when I first started, but that was because I didn't know what I was getting into. The social justice aspect really appealed to me. The fact that so many applications and websites are not being built by a larger variety of people, and they kind of falter You can Google some examples of this, of platforms built by very small portions of people that just simply don't work for other groups. And it is a problem in technology. And the only way for us to fix that is by making sure that everyone is included. And then, you know, I'd say my first and foremost desire to give it a change was just having a better job that actually helped me pay bills and like paid my student loans. It was a huge motivator. Um, I can't actually see the chat, so I'm not sure if anyone's posting, but I'd be really curious to hear some other responses.
Yeah. Anna is saying job stability is a big one. Caitlin says that it was hard for her to pinpoint, but she loves this list and it's really resonating with her. We got some livable wage, remote work. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
people looking for remote work. I see it definitely. Kevin says he loves to learn, love to problem
Mhm.
solve. He's a plumber actually now.
Excellent.
Speaking of which, work-life balance. Okay, now everyone's writing in. Love of tech and art. I love that. That's
Nice.
awesome. Yeah. Also, the feeling of like the opportunity for advancement. And we hear this a lot from students that they're looking for a job where they feel like they have sort of longevity and like, a big path ahead, which I think is something that, like, unfortunately, a lot of people don't have in their careers, even if their career is good in other ways. Yeah, problem
Absolutely.
solving, creating stuff from scratch, that being a very gratifying experience. Yeah, I love this.
That's awesome. All right. So, another topic is, how the heck do you know when you're ready for a boot camp? It's a big, big thing. You're investing a lot of time, a lot of money in something that maybe you don't know if you're ready to do it in general anyway. And these are my personal items that I think you should have, and how you're going to know if you're actually ready. The first is very clear, explicit goals. What is the desired lifestyle that you want? What kind of work life balance? What kind of salary do you want to be working? Do you want to work part time or full time? How much vacation are you going to require if you take on one of these tech jobs? And also, what kind of work sector do you want to work in? Like, if you're a plumber, man, you've got excellent experience that could be applied to so many different apps that probably need people. Um, all that to say, have a vision of what it is that you want as the outcome after your boot camp. Dream about the job that you want and the lifestyle and all of those factors. Again, make a list, make a spreadsheet, start writing it down, use paper, anything you can to document what it is that your goal after completing is. The next thing, have you completed some free intro courses? I think this is like super important. There's a lot of free small courses to get your feet wet. And I think it's really important that you complete one of those smaller introductory courses and really get a feel for what coding and software actually is. Because if you just go into a boot camp and you've, never even looked at code, if you don't even know what HTML is, you're probably going to have a lot harder of a time. And not only will completing these courses give you the exposure you need, but it's also a leg up. If you've already started studying, if you already have some of the base knowledge, it's going to give you a little boost in the beginning of your boot camp as you cover the basics. Then it's more like review. Then you're even more ready for the following more complicated topics by the time you're in that boot camp. Have you dedicated consistent time to learning code? For me, this is kind of important just because I require habit to be successful. As you guys saw, I dabbled in a couple of different platforms, and it took me a little while to get my kind of cadence to really know that I was ready for a boot camp. But are you committing an hour or 2 hours every day, a couple of hours a week, whatever it is? Ensure that you can do that for maybe a month, maybe 2 months. Heck, I dabbled in code for like a year and a half before I even started going into tech meetups. But make sure that you can have that type of habit, that you can dedicate that time to just learning. The next one, gosh, they're all so important. It's hard to kind of weigh them, but be fully organized. Whether you're going to work part time or full time on the boot camp, you need to have a plan for your time. I really think this is extremely important to allow you to maintain your mental health as you try and get that work life balance. But if you know the time at which you're going to be working on these things, you don't have to stress about, oh, it's later in the week than I thought it was, and I didn't get this thing done. You don't have to stress because you've already had blocks of time where you dedicated to that work. And then you don't have to think about when you're going to work on things, when you're going to fit it in, but oh, you wanted to do this fun thing. Instead, you can look at your schedule and say, oh, I have time from 3 to 4 on this day to go on that walk. No problem. Make sure you're organized. I mean, maybe you don't have to be, but I sure as heck have to be organized when contemplating big tasks or endeavors like this. Next, documenting success. If you're gearing up for a boot camp, I really hope that you are already documenting your success so that you can bolster yourself against the coming challenges, because there will be challenges. You will get stuck. And again, if you can look back at these blog posts, these lists, and say, you know what? I felt this exact same way when I ran into this issue before, and I crushed it. I figured it out. You can look back and you can know that you are capable. The mind does not remember things the way that it is. And so you need to make sure that you have a solid thing based in reality, based on your real successes that you can look back on. I promise you this will help. In fact, I accidentally stumbled upon a blog post from like 2019, a couple of weeks ago, that was talking about how I somehow managed to dual boot my computer with Linux and Windows without the help of my husband who knows computers. And I remember feeling so happy and prideful about that moment. And, I look back at it now and I'm like, well, I just followed the tutorial. But at the time, it was so important to me, and I was able to use that to know that I can figure things out. So again, I really, really want to stress this one. You got to prepare yourself. You have to prove and remember that you are smart, that you are getting things done, and that you can do it. Next is relationships. Try to have a support system. This could be family, spouse, friends, but it can also be like a meetup group or just talking to someone about your journey. I think it's pretty important to have literally anyone that you can kind of talk to, that you can get excited, that you can talk through your problems, whether it's code or careers. It's going to be helpful to have someone to talk to about it. Lastly, again, vision. After you have made these goals, after you've completed these intro courses, you've dedicated this time, you're organized, can you see yourself coding for a living? Can you see yourself fixing these problems for a living? And once you have all of these things, I really feel that it is almost impossible for you not to be successful in a boot camp. Again, these are my personal recommendations and just the things that have contributed to my success. It could be different for other people, but what I will tell you is that us humans are way more similar than we are not. And a lot of these things are purely based on like psychological principles, and I find them highly scientifically supported. So, now that you're thinking about getting into tech, you think you're ready, what kind of advantages do people who are transitioning into tech actually have? First and foremost, perspective. So tech now applies and is almost integrated into like every industry, and your experience in those industries is invaluable. Who better to build those tools than the person who's actually using them or who has been using them? Let's say you've been a teacher for the last 25 years and you start to get into tech. There are so many education platforms out there that are trying to build better tools, and you, with your experience, your skills, your knowledge of what works and what doesn't work in a classroom is going to be gold. Remember, all of your skills apply. Um, so, coming from a place of non technical experience, this was super helpful to me. So, you will know better than a lot of people how to communicate those things, having come from a place of ignorance. You had to learn all this stuff. For me, it took a lot of repeated exposure to things. I had to reread and renotate and rewatch videos on things until I got it. And it took a lot of work and a lot of patience. But because of that, I feel that I am able to talk about these things in a way that a non technical person can understand, because that's where I came from. And that is the same advantage that you will have as well. I know I just said this, but all skills apply. Every skill that you've developed in these other careers, whether it's multitasking, management, especially communication, industry knowledge, being organized, prioritization of those types of things, all of it applies. And in fact, these things that you've developed in other disciplines will help you be successful. Customer facing experience. Shout out to all my all my service industry and retail peeps out there, because gosh dang, don't you know how to talk to people who are emotional or angry or rude or whatever, but you understand what you need to do, hopefully, to talk to those people, to communicate. Again, you're going to have a huge advantage having spoken to a lot of people before, and it can really, really help you. Opportunity to explain the transition. So, one of the things that you'll probably be asked in a lot of interviews since you're transitioning into tech is why you got into it. And some people who maybe go the traditional route may not be asked this question, but for you, it's an opportunity to display your desires, your passions, what it is that drew you into tech, to really show a piece of yourself that I feel like others don't get the opportunity to. And so that again, I think is a big advantage of people transitioning into tech. So, I have some best advice. Surprise, the top of my list is document your success. Again, try to reflect on all of those challenges that you've overcome and remind yourself that you can handle the next challenge. I'll tell you, I have cursed at my computer. I have cried at my computer. I have failed a boot camp interview. Like, these are all things that I have eventually overcome. And now I remember the success after that failure. You have to remember this. You have to document it. Again, whatever you need to do, this will help. It's the biggest thing that you can do to fight imposter syndrome. And then you can even look back and you can say, look at the scale of my progress. Look at the challenges as they mount. And I've overcome every single one of those. Start attending tech meetups. You guys have already taken the first step today just by being here to gather some information, but networking is an amazing way to meet more people or even land a job. Remember that my first job was because I had been going to a Women Who Code meetup consistently. I met this woman who happened to be hiring at the time that I was graduating, and that's how I got my first job. Motivation. So I really think the current model is quite backwards. Everyone says, oh, I'm not motivated. I don't feel like working. But the truth is that you must work to motivate. Again, when your time is scheduled, you go on and you work and you feel the momentum build because you're doing it consistently. This is going to be really important when things get tough. Be an investigator when coding. So, whenever you get stuck, whenever I get stuck, which is all the time, one of the things that I do is write down what I'm doing. What do I know about the problem? What is it that I'm seeing? What should be happening? What are the things I'm noticing? What do I suspect the problem could be related to? This will also help you when you have to communicate to others when you're stuck. Then you can say, oh, well, I have a list of the things that I've tried. Here's what I've seen. Here's all the information that I have, and it will help you get others up to speed faster so that they can help you fix your issue. And I can tell you this, when you're stuck on a coding problem, it helps unbelievably to talk through that problem. Sometimes when you're simply describing this thing to another person, it can help you figure out what you're missing. Take notes. So while learning, I really highly recommend that you take notes that you can reference or look back on. I know that when I was going through my boot camp, I kept an entire little project of notes for each framework, each language, and it did take me longer. I know you saw the 10 months it took me to graduate, I know, but I now have an entire repository for every language, every framework, every tool that I've used. And when I get stuck, I don't have to wade through the infinite Google results. I can look at my notes and be like, oh, yeah, I've encountered this problem before. Here's how I fixed it. Or, oh, yeah, here's that answer to that thing that I've seen before. It can really help you, especially when like the boot camp I went through, they don't really exist anymore. And so I can't look back at that reference material. But luckily I took notes. Bookmark good resources. So I have an entire folder on my bookmark bar called resources that's broken down by language, by framework, by tool, whatever, wherever you think things will fit. Save those resources, keep them organized so that you can easily come back to them so you don't have to Google stuff every single time because you will be Googling quite a bit. But keep yourself organized, keep your resources and your knowledge close at hand. The next thing I recommend, consume some tech media. Honestly, I think this one doesn't get enough attention, perhaps, but whether it's Reddit or podcast and newsletter or books, just start consuming other content than just code. A lot of people can get hung up on knowing the exact syntax or reading through huge blocks of code, but sometimes you have to foster that interest, that passion in tech in other ways, such as learning how tech is affecting particular industries, how it's changing other things. There's a ton of things obviously related to tech in our world, and I highly recommend getting into it. Get a mentor. Try to have someone who has experience that can advise you, that can bolster you, that can help try and answer all of the questions that you have. I was very fortunate in my boot camp to have two mentors who were very, very kind and answered all of my questions. Next, build projects that are fun. Again, you want to make sure that you're trying to foster those passions by building things that are meaningful or fun. One of the first projects that I built in my boot camp was a Zelda Ocarina of Time quiz app. And it was so cute and fun that I was just impassioned to make it even cooler and did fun things that were kind of beyond what was necessary because it was so cute to me. Um, Ask questions. This one I want to stress because you're gonna get stuck and you need to reach out and you need to ask for help. And a sign of a good developer is when you ask those questions and when you reach out for help. And again, if you're already taking notes and being investigative about the problems, when you reach out to ask those questions, you will be prepared to get a good answer based on the information that you provided. Next, take breaks. So the research is pretty clear that a stressed brain literally cannot think correctly or properly. So when you get stuck, when you are so frustrated, walk away from the computer, take a break, go walk in nature, do some yoga, play with your puppy, whatever you need to do to relax. And once you're more relaxed, come back to the problem. Even if you get a good night's rest in between, it is unbelievable what being more relaxed can do when you look at a problem. And lastly, my best advice is to be courageous because you will fail. You will get stuck. But if you persist, you will triumph if you're asking for help and you have the patience for yourself. And you have to remember that you cannot be courageous if you do not have fear. So that's some of the best advice that I have. And then I do want to share my favorite coding meme with all of my experience. This is the true difference between those with experience and those without. So, as a junior developer, every terrible problem, every horrible thing, like I said, I've cried and cursed at my computer. I have been this woman on the left with the fire and the planes all around you, and the world is ending, and I can't do this, and I don't know anything. I have been there. I am often there. But the true skill that you will develop as a senior developer someday, it's not that these problems or issues or bugs or complications are going to go away. They will continue to happen. Your computer will break. Some package will be crazy and interfere with something unexpectedly. You'll spend hours on something that should have taken 10 minutes. But the real difference between those with experience and those without is how you react to it. And again, if you're practicing that patience, if you have the confidence that you have been building based on your success, you know that it's only a matter of time before you solve that problem. And you don't have to panic because you know you may just need a break. And then you'll come back and you realize that you had a capitalized letter and it was supposed to be lowercase and you couldn't see it because you were so stressed out. This is the truth. And I wanted to share it with you, and it makes me laugh every single time. So, some of the other questions that people ask that I feel were kind of perhaps maybe not covered as much in my talk, I wanted to answer some of them. So, most surprising thing about being a software developer, one, how important communication is. Again, I can't stress enough how much of an impact it can make if you are both kind and clear in your communication and the responses that you're going to get back from other developers and other clients. Um, Another thing that was surprising is how complicated technology is. When you first start learning and you discover HTML and CSS, it's it makes sense and it's not too crazy. There's some weird stuff, there's some tricky things, but a lot of it you can build with that HTML and CSS. But once you get a little bit deeper, once you start working with JavaScript and dynamic web pages and databases and backends and all of these other things, it's so much more complex than I could have ever imagined. And it really does uh, lend to my empathy to other applications and websites. Because sometimes when I see something is broken, I'm like, oh no, that bug would probably be terrible to fix. And so it actually lends me a little bit of patience with websites. Um, Another thing that was surprising is how creative you can be. One of the excellent questions that was asked of me in one of my Credly interviews was, for a developer, is it more important to be efficient or be creative? And I literally had to pause for about 30 seconds because my mind was like, oh, duh, efficiency. But I started reviewing all of the problems that I had solved in the past, all of the crazy things I've seen senior developers do, the things that they've discovered, the workarounds that they've created, and it has to be creativity. There are so many different ways to do things. There are so many tools available now in code that there could be 10 or 20 different ways to do a thing. And it's up to you to be creative in how you fix it or how you do it. Another question, is tech hard? The answer is yes. Tech is challenging in that it requires attention to detail, lots of reading, and the courage to fail. You cannot grow without failure. It is going to be difficult, but again, if you are a problem solver, an investigator who's using patience as your tool, you will be successful with time. Do you need advanced math? I would say this probably depends on the industry, but I would say no, and only because that's my current exposure. We have used some crazy math, but again, there's libraries out there that people have created so that you can use those libraries in your application and you don't have to write the math. Sometimes you can simply pass that data into a function and it'll give you what you want. Another question, can you become an engineer with some college credits? For sure. I think it's possible with 0 credits. Another great question, possible for someone over 50 to become a software engineer? I think this will always, of course, depend on the person. Age is just a number. I think there is some ageism in some industries, but I mean, just the other day, as I was scrolling Reddit and reading some stories, this person was talking about how they hired a retired vet at their company as a junior developer. Anything is possible. Again, if you've got the right attitude, if you have communication skills, people will look for that. How many hours a day am I at the computer? I definitely aim for 8. Sometimes a little bit more happens and sometimes a touch less, but most companies really just want you to work your 40 and that's it. Good career for someone with social anxiety? I think it could be. Again, I kind of have limited experience and I think it's going to depend on the company. At my current job, like I said, I've had 0 pair programming. I almost never have to meet with people or do that kind of stuff anymore. And so I just get to spend a lot of personal time at home working on things and communicating via text, which, believe it or not, I kind of consider myself an extroverted introvert, and so I love it. So I think it kind of depends on the company that you work for and your own personal style, but I think it's definitely possible. So, advice for students seeking a job. Some of you are graduating or currently enrolled in a boot camp, and you're wondering, what can I do? And my best advice here is to, one, build a portfolio website. Make something cute where you can showcase your fun projects and talk about yourself. Draw attention. The first thing a recruiter or potential job seeker will do, check out your LinkedIn, see if you have a website, look at your projects. Again, that Zelda quiz app actually came up in my Credly interview. One of the product managers said, "Oh, I looked at your website and I took your Zelda quiz. That was so cool. And, we chatted about it a little bit because we were both nerds and it was really fun. Another good piece of advice: attend tech meetups. You will meet so many people and gain so much information. It's not just about meeting people in the industry. They're often lecturing on really relevant topics or showing introductory material on computer or web related topics. Make sure you have a LinkedIn. Again, there's a lot of jobs, a lot of recruiters, a lot of information on LinkedIn. It's just a good way to market yourself. Um, Start writing blogs. If you are running out of things to do and maybe don't want to spend time on some of these other things, a lot of successful people write blogs about solving problems or even just the struggles of being a student and learning these things and how they're overcoming them. And some people will look for that. And then the last piece of advice for students seeking a job is keep your eyes on the prize. Again, make sure you have that vision of the dream, of the lifestyle, of the job that you want, and know that you are already on track and you're taking those steps to get it. Stay focused. So I wanted to kind of open things up now. For other questions in case people had them. I know we, oh my gosh, are over time, but I did want to offer that up in case other people had them.
Yes. Let me pull up. There's one question. I think you did actually just speak to this, but if you have anything to add, the question with the most upvotes is, what advice would you give a skill crusher student looking for a job when most companies require a minimum 2 years experience? But the only experience I have is for skill.
So I do have one thing that I would add besides the things that I already mentioned is apply to that job anyway. Do it. Put your application out there. Be confident in yourself. A lot of these job postings are by HR people who don't actually know exactly what they're looking for, and they may still contact you about it as well. And that's probably all that I have to add to that question. Was there any other questions that we should address?
I'm just seeing something that we can do quickly. I guess, so Jam is asking, what level were you coding when you started your first tech job? Were you an entry level, intermediate, or expert? Obviously, I think you were literally entry level, but I guess could you sort of give a little more color to what that?
Definitely. Yeah. I would definitely say entry level. I think there's particular experience that you simply can't gain until you're in a job. And while I felt confident about coding and building some things, I was definitely super nervous. And the first time someone asked me to write a function in front of them, I forgot how. And so, I was super entry level. Yep. So there's just things you can't learn until you have the job. And I was definitely a tiny, tiny baby developer when I first started.
Yeah, totally. What else? Maybe we'll just do this last question real fast, which is Michelle is asking, what was an example of something you had to do during the technical part of a job interview?
Oh, sure. I mean, like an actual thing that I had to do. I suppose, so in the 2-hour technical interview that I had, it was actually really cool. So it was with 2 other developers, and the first section was them asking things like, what would you try to implement or do if you wanted to have 2 tables and this is how they should be related? How would you describe that relationship in code? And then I got to talk them through it and explain my reasoning for why. After that, there was like a coding challenge, and you can try those types of coding challenges on like Lead Code or HackerRank, all those types of things. But it was a pretty simple coding question. It was like, if you're iterating over these 2 arrays, print such and such results if they match at these indices or something like that. And I had to read through the question a couple of times, and I had to write notes in the code itself for me to be able to actually understand and remember the exact requirements. One thing that you might hear about or learn about is what's called pseudo coding, where you write out in plain text what it is you want to do. Oftentimes those code questions will have a lot of unnecessary information. And so for me, it's really helpful to kind of rewrite those expectations in words and just say, okay, I need this thing And this simple line encompasses what this next piece of code should do. And it definitely took a little bit of iteration to get my code working, but it eventually did, which was really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And I will just let everyone who's listening know that there is a whole class in the Get Hired program about technical tasks, because the truth is that they vary enormously, but there's also some best practices and stuff like that. And the last question I'll have you answer, sorry, I'm trying to get the exact wording because this is not something I'm familiar with, but it's something about what Scout character you'd be or something like that.
What Scout character?
No, wait, hold on. I've got to get this right. It has to do with Sailor Moon.
Oh gosh. Okay. If my 10-year-old self is honest, I've always loved Serena and how ditzy she is, and I'm a total klutz, and so it'd have to be Sailor Moon, I guess. Good question.
Okay, cool. I hope I got that question correct enough. Nice. Kristen, I think I speak for everyone. So inspiring. Just such a pleasure to hear your story. I mean, I hope to. I'll just say it for myself. I am so impressed with you. And okay, hold on. How do I do this? I want to have us be side by side. There we go. Oh yeah. And I'm going to get rid of this. Okay. Yeah. And I think that, I hope that everyone who is watching is inspired by how impressive Kristen is. Because at the end of the day, like, you haven't been doing it for that long. And yet here you are, this phenomenal, amazing, inspiring, knowledgeable software engineer. So I hope that inspires everybody. I think there's no question that you did. So we are totally way over time, but it's been such a pleasure. It was totally worth it. This will absolutely be recorded. Everyone who signed up will get an email with the recording. We'll just, have to sign Kristen up to come back and talk to us some more about a different topic. But yeah, really, it was such a pleasure, and congrats on your new role and all of your success. And we just really appreciate you taking the time. It means a lot.
Well, thank you very much again for hosting this. And I love chatting with people about this. You guys can hit me up on LinkedIn. And I just want to say thank you again for taking the time to look at a possible career change. And you are all more than capable. You can do it. Just put in the work and you will be successful. Thank you.
And then I will lure you back here to tell the next group of people. All right, fantastic. So everyone have a wonderful rest of your Thursday. Thank you so much for coming, and we'll talk soon. Bye.